So the dinosaur that we have in the bone bed is an animal called a pachyrhinosaurus. It's a smaller, older cousin of the Triceratops, except instead of having a horn on its nose like a Triceratops, it has this big bony bump called a boss. So the name pachyrhinosaurus means thick-nosed lizard, and that's the dinosaur that's preserved in our bone bed, and that is the skull that we are about to extract. This fossil has a name. Most of the skulls that we find in the area do. So this one is called Big Sam. First of all, the size is unique for Pachyrhinosaurus. It is one of the largest Pachyrhinosaurus skulls that has ever been excavated, at least here in northern Alberta. It's also preserved upside down, as if the animal was lying on its back, which means that there's features such as the brain case and the palate region of the mouth that are preserved in this specimen that are often obscured or crushed in other specimens.
So how do you go about removing a fossil that is that size, that big, and also has that kind of detail? So you want to be as protective of it as you can.
The first thing you have to do when you have a fossil is to isolate it. Because this bone bed is so dense, we had to remove over 300 fossils that were jammed up right close against the skull. So that took us all summer. Then you dig around it. You basically dig a trench around it, put on a field jacket, which is basically a burlap and plaster jacket that you wrap around it that hardens up. Then you have to dig underneath it. Eventually you flip it out of the ground, and then comes the fun task of actually getting it back to the museum.
And you mentioned, too, that you have to take all the fossils that are around it out. What kind of things were you finding around this skull?
For the most part, other Pachyrhinosaurus bones, so things like ribs, vertebra, limb bones. We found some hip bones in there. We had other elements of the skull, like parts of the frill. We weren't really sure if that belonged to Big Sam or if that was from another animal. I think we also had a maxilla, so one part of the upper jaw. So just a whole ton of other bones that were kind of just jammed right in against the skull. There's information in the skull that can tell us about what the species is, what the features that define the species. If they have crazy head ornamentation, it tells us about kind of sexual dimorphism, display structures, community structures. If you have the brain case, like Big Sam does, you can actually reconstruct the brain of a Pachyrhinosaurus or another dinosaur. So skulls are always very significant. And if you can get a complete skull, chances are that that is a research project in itself. That could potentially be its own paper, its own peer-reviewed research. And so the fact that it's a skull, the fact that it's complete, and the fact that it's really big has us very excited.